teach reading to the grade levels that your children are in. So this is my dream job this year. I cannot tell you how happy and excited I am to be doing what I'm doing this year and to be able to
Estoy muy
share.
emocionado de estar haciendo lo que hago.
Sorry, I got distracted.
Hang on,
Being able to
Anna.
share with you all
Oh, thank you.
some things that I think will help you better understand how our kids learn to read and hopefully be able to feel confident talking to your child's teachers about reading and understanding what they're telling you. And I also want to give you.
Sean, could I get the Spanish interpretation first? So
Yeah, sorry.
I can get everything that you're saying.
So sorry.
Okay, no, it's fine.
Okay.
Hey Anna, could you do the Spanish introduction first, please? Can you hear me?
Sure thing, I can. Do you want me to give the instructions for the interpretation?
Yes, please.
Ok. Buenas noches. El día de hoy estaremos utilizando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Si usa una computadora, verá un símbolo de mundo en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Para escuchar la interpretación, por favor presione el símbolo y luego seleccione la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Por último, por favor, elija el canal de idioma. Las computadoras Chromebook no le permitirán acceder a estos ajustes de interpretación. La aplicación es necesaria. Si usa una tableta o teléfono, presione la pantalla suavemente en la esquina inferior. Seleccione los 3 puntos en donde dice More y verá un menú aparecer donde puede seleccionar la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Luego seleccione su canal de idioma y por último presione la palabra Listo. Gracias. Ready.
Thank you. I'm gonna wait until she got my slides up and then I'll know I'm ready to go. Thank you, Andrea. Are we gonna see the slides up here? Or?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, you can go ahead and go on to the next one. Oh, that's a big picture of me.
Oh,
So I started to tell you a little bit about me, but I've been teaching this is my 13th year at AEA. I feel very lucky to be here. I love this school. I love what we do, and I'm happy that all of you are here as well, and hope that you have same feelings of love and happiness for your kids that are here. This is my first year as a literacy specialist, and this is my first time giving this presentation. So I want it to be helpful for you. I tried to build this presentation in a way I thought would be helpful for you, but please ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, please let me know. I want this to help you. So I love your feedback and your interaction with me while we work. I told you my son attended here from kindergarten to 8th grade. He's a freshman in high school now. Things that I like are spending time with my family. I love sports. I'm a huge Padres fan, and I'm super excited to have season tickets right now because we might actually win a World Series. So very excited about that. You can go to the next one, Andrea. Today, what I want to do with you is I want to give you an overview of what are the components of reading and how do kids learn how to read. I would like you guys to kind of have an understanding of the different things that that our students need to learn in order to be good readers. For two reasons. I want you guys to know that so that you can learn alongside your children and help them. But I also want you to be able to have conversations with their teachers and feel like you are understanding what the teachers are sharing too, so that we can together work to support your children. I want to describe to you two parts of learning to read. One of them is called phonological awareness, and we'll talk more about that. The other one is phonics. And I want to give you some strategies for things that you can do at home to build those skills for your children. And then lastly, I want to tell you where you can find some additional resources or what to do if you have questions and you're not sure what to do or where to go. Andrea? Thank you. And so first we'll talk about the components of learning to read. You can go to the next. Thank you. Multitasking. So in 2000, we formed something called the National Reading Panel, and they did a lot of research. And based on all of that research, they came out with 5 components of learning to read that are now known as the pillars of learning to read. So they are across the bottom here: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. It's okay if you don't know what those mean yet, because we're going to talk a little bit more about them. But those 5 things are really important skills that your child needs to have to be a successful reader. You can go to the next one, Andrea. Thank you. So we'll go through each one of those. So the first one is called phonemic awareness. And that's just the ability to be able to hear, identify the sounds of speech. So if we're asking a child, what are the sounds in the word cat? They can tell us, at, those are the sounds. I don't have to see the word. I don't have to see the letters. I can think about the sounds. And so phonemic awareness is what is the skill that kids need to have. It's like a pre-reading skill that they need. So they need to understand rhyming. They need to recognize when words start with the same sound. So all of these things in preschool and even transitional kindergarten, where there's a lot of songs and a lot of poetry, is just getting them used to hearing those sounds and playing with sounds and being silly with language. You can go to the next one. So another piece is called phonics. I'm sure you may have heard this one. This is a buzzword in teaching reading these days. All it means is that kids need to understand that there's a sound that goes with a letter, a written letter. So the sound A, or the letter A, makes the sound A, the short sound A. They need to be able to understand that there are written letters and they make sounds. Until they understand that concept, they really can't read yet, because that's kind of the code. That's what we call it, the alphabetic code. They have to understand that there's a code to reading, and it's based on the sounds that go with the letters. So that's basically what phonics is. Any questions so far? Okay, we'll go to the next one. Fluency. So when you're sitting in a meeting with your teachers, you may hear them talk about, oh, your child's fluency is So fluency just means this is the rate, the speed at which your child reads, but it also includes their intonation, their if they're reading dialogue, are they making it sound like someone's? We want them to sound like they're talking, right, or having a conversation when they're reading. We don't want them to read like robots, which is how they read when they're first starting, right? So we want to build that skill so that they can read smoothly and it sounds like they're talking. Fluency is important because until you have the ability to read smoothly, you can't really understand what you're reading. You can't think about, what is this about that I'm reading? You're focused more on, how do I sound out this word, right? And we want kids to be able to understand what they read. So fluency is a big part of that. Andrea, can you go to the next one? Thank you. Number 4. This is a big one, vocabulary. So vocabulary is really just the words that they know. And they can have, they may have vocabulary in English, they may have vocabulary in whatever their home language is, but the vocabulary just is the total sum of all of the words that they know, that they can hear and they know what the word is. This is really important when kids are learning to read, because they rely on their vocabulary to help them figure out when they're sounding out a word. So they may say, at, cat, and they, oh, I know what word cat, I know what that means. It's a little furry animal. They're trying to sound out a word that they've never heard before or they don't know. It makes it a lot harder because they don't have that recognition piece. So this is a big one for families at home. One way that you can increase their vocabulary is just talking to them all the time about whatever they want to talk about. Have conversations and read to them. Read to them and expose them to all kinds of different words. And if they stop you and ask you, what does that word mean? Talk about what that word is. And it may not seem like it, but that's a big part of learning to read, is being able to match the word that you're reading with a word that you've heard before, that you know, and it helps them when they're in that sounding out phase. Go ahead.
Can I add
Yes,
in the
please.
home language?
Yes. Okay, in any language.
Any language.
The things that we're going to be talking about today, we're really going to be focusing on the skills for beginning readers. So we're not going to be getting into some of these more higher level things in any depth tonight. That's for another conversation. But we'll be talking about the sounds, the awareness of the sounds, and talking about vocabulary. This can be in any language, your home language, you can practice in English, it doesn't matter the language. You can do all of these things in any language, and it builds their skill. Because there's all this research that shows that if a child can say the sounds and blend them together in one language, it helps them build their skills in the other language too. So practicing these can be done in any language at home. So if your family's more comfortable with one language than another, it doesn't really matter which language you're practicing these in, unless you're specifically trying to do English. So that's kind of a fun thing about it. So you can be flexible with the language that you use. Thank you, Mrs. Krim. And then this is the final piece, right? This is why we read. This is what we want our children to be able to do once they learn the other skills and are fluent with them, is they can understand what they read. In kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, our kids are learning to read. But then when they start to get in third grade and fourth grade, they're reading to learn. They're expected to be able to read smoothly and fluently enough that they can understand what they're reading and make sense of it. And then you don't have to put so much brain power into sounding out the words anymore, because that part has become more automatic for them. And this is where we want them to get. Even though kids in TK, K1 are still learning how to read, we still are asking them questions about what they read or what we read to them. So even though this is kind of where we want kids to be independently doing later, when you're reading at home with your child, you can stop and ask them a question. Well, what happened? Why did that happen? Who did that? To make sure they're paying attention. And that can be done from just them listening to you reading stories to them too. So that's something that you can already be practicing. Next one. Any questions about those 5 pillars so far? We're not going to go super deep into those, but I wanted you to have a broad picture of this is kind of all of the things that teachers are thinking about when we're teaching kids how to read. So one of the other things that I want to mention to you is this is a very basic beginning thing that all kids need to have before they can learn to read, and it's called concepts of print. So basically you can see there's a book here, and they need to know that which way you hold the book, that there's a front cover, there's a back cover, there are pages in the book that we turn, and that the text goes from left to right, and we start at the top of the page and read down. So before kids really know books, they might not know these things. So when they're really young, or if they haven't learned that yet, you spend time when you're reading with them talking about, oh, this is a book. These are pictures. These are words. You can go to the next slide. But kind of just that understanding of how writing works, right? How a book works. What do we do with a book? Well, we read it. We look at the pictures and we read the words. So kind of pointing those things out to them and talking about them is really helpful when they're very beginning. And this can even happen, before school age. You might be doing these things with your little ones. But if they aren't really aware of it yet, you do it whenever they are ready for it. That's one other thing I wanted to share with you all is there's such a broad spectrum of where kids are at. In kindergarten, especially, you have kids that come in and they know all of their letters already and maybe some of the sounds. And there's kids that may have never seen a letter before. So everyone's at different levels. And it's important for you to think about, where's my child at? What level are they at, so that I can try to help them at the level they need me right now, right? So this might be something that you have to go back with younger kids and talk more about. The other thing that kind of falls into this is understanding that there are letters and there are words that are groups of letters. Who's here? We'll take a break in a second to get some dinner. And also that the words are put together into sentences. So just kind of understanding to be able to see that and hear that We want them to understand that those are different things. A word is different from a sentence. A letter is different from a word. They're just starting to talk to them about those things. Any question mark? Any question marks? Yeah, I read the punctuation marks. Any questions about concepts of print? Would you all like some pizza? You can take a little pause and you can grab some pizza, or you can feel free to get pizza whenever you would like. I'm fine. Where's anyone hungry?
And
All right, go get some pizza.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Get some
Can we
pizza.
have more?
We'll wait a sec.
There's some more in the library with this. We have more.
Help yourselves. We always tell the kids you can't learn when you're hungry. So if you're hungry, eat something.
And they cannot.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
For example, the child just have like
Mhm.
their chronological processing delay, it's like that. So what are the recommendations, like continue to apply what you've mentioned so far in the slides, like with
Yeah,
the child?
as much as you can. So I think that's something also to collaborate with a speech and language pathologist on, because, you know, sometimes there are physical reasons why they aren't able to make a sound yet. So the question was, if you have a child who maybe has a speech and language impairment, and it's difficult for them to make certain sounds, how do you deal with that? So what I've done in the past is, if they physically are unable to make the sound, we still want to expose them to hearing the sound. So we can model for them, oh, the sound is, that may be a sound that the person can say, but whatever the sound might be that they can't, then you would just want them to be able to hear it, even if they can't make it yet. And then I think then just collaborating with the speech and language pathologist, I would ask them, should I be attempting to get the child to say it? Or, you know, are we not going there yet? The other thing that I think about when I have kids that have trouble making a sound is trying to help them understand what their mouth needs to be doing in order to make the sound. We have a lot of kids who like the L sound and be hard for a lot of kids. So we taught, sometimes you got to get a mirror and show them, you know, you want your tongue to be touching the roof of your mouth, right behind your front teeth. Oh, and you have to show them, this is what your mouth is doing. This is what your tongue is doing. So sometimes that can be really helpful too, just pointing out the physical things that their lips and their tongue and their mouth need to do. And even if they can't quite get it, they can get a close approximation, you know? So that's kind of how I would approach that. Thank you so much for your question.
John, can I add something to
Yes.
that? I think, like, so I'm seeing as first grade teacher, the F sound and TH, they hear it as the same thing. And with all this mask wearing we've been doing the last few years, that is a sound that I'm really noticing that practice. And it is, I mean, I tell them to stick their tongue out of it, but it really, I almost have to over exaggerate that sound for them to get that, because I'm really noticing that is one, and it would make sense, right? They don't see it.
And we don't talk about that a lot traditionally. We don't talk about what is your tongue doing, what are your lips doing, what is your mouth doing to make a sound. You guys, I mean, you don't have to be an expert to figure that out either. If you make the sound, TH says, you can think about what's happening with my mouth. So like your tongue is between your teeth, and TH actually makes a voice sound and a unvoiced sound. But for both sounds, your tongue is between your teeth. So I have to prompt first grade students all the time. Okay, it's TH. Remember, where is your tongue when you're making the sound? And you make it a game. You stick your tongue out. I don't see your tongue. And you guys can do that too if you just think about what is the sound for F. Oh, I see my teeth are biting down on my bottom lip. So I'm blowing air out, right? But we take these things for granted. We don't think about them. But if we think about it and try to make it really clear to our kids, it's helpful to them. Sometimes we just we're so used to doing these things that we don't go back and think about, well, how do we do those things, right? But sometimes our kids need to know, well, how do I do that? I don't know. You're telling me, say, but I don't know how to do that, you know? So that can be something that gets in the way. Thank you for asking that question. Can you go to the next one, please, Andrea? Thank you. So I want to show you guys. Yes, I'm sorry, Miriam.
Yes, I have a question also. Me as a parent, I speak Spanish. Some of the sounds are kind of difficult because my language, my first is Spanish. So some of the letters are like kind of tricky for me too. So sometimes what I'm trying to do for David is like my other kids help me with those kind of specific sounds. And it's hard because sometimes they have to do something and like continue with that. So I'm trying to, okay, remember what your sister says, that's a sound or something like that. Because for me, like I said, the language is like not
Right. Well, there are sounds that happen in English that don't happen in Spanish.
yes.
So when you've grown up speaking Spanish, I think that the CH sound is not a sound that happens in Spanish, and the SH sound is not a sound that happens in Spanish. So that is a very common thing that can be difficult for people whose home language is Spanish to get those sounds and really be able to incorporate them in, because they weren't hearing those sounds from the time they were a little baby. Right. And that's how we learn language. We hear our families speaking it around us. We get used to hearing those sounds. So for kids whose home language is Spanish, and that's what they learn first, sometimes, and for adults too, it's hard to then get those sounds that aren't a part of Spanish. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And so when we talk about that in our groups too, we say, oh yeah, you know what, that isn't a part, that sound doesn't happen in Spanish, so it might be harder to say. So we just try to practice it more. And that's a great strategy that you have, is getting us another sibling to try and say it if you don't feel like you're saying it correctly or the way that you want to say it. So thank you for pointing that out. It can be tough. And that's true for, you know, German has some sounds that English doesn't have, and probably that Spanish doesn't have either. So at this school, it's kind of a benefit of being dual language immersion, because almost everyone is trying to learn some sounds that they're not very familiar with. So it kind of normalizes it for everyone, and nobody feels that they stand out too much because of that. And we try to tell them, oh yeah, that's normal, because in that language, we don't have that sound. So we just have to practice it and do your best. Thank you for bringing that up. Today, we're going to focus on two primary things that are important for beginning readers. And you go to the next slide, Andrea. So we'll go back to the pillars, but really we're going to look at the first two pillars tonight. That's what we're going to spend most of our time on. You can go to the next one, please. So first, we're going to start with phonological awareness. So these are also kind of pre-reading listening skills. So again, we're talking about sounds. How are kids hearing the sounds? How can they think about the sounds that they hear? So phonological awareness is the ability to manipulate and do things with those sounds that they hear. This is before you're even asking your children to look at letters, to look at words. This is just them hearing things. So there's all these different things that fall under the umbrella of phonological awareness. Kids need to be able to differentiate words in a sentence. So if I say the cat has a hat, they can count. The cat has a hat. Oh, there's 5 words in that sentence. So again, am I asking you to look at anything and read? Nope, we're just listening to something and figuring out, oh, there's 5 words there. Okay. There's syllables. The syllables are something, you know, as the kids get older, they have to read words with more than one syllable. Those are longer words. Syllable is just a part of a word. So it's getting them used to being able to hear those syllables. And in my group, we do this a lot with their name, because they're so familiar with their name, right? So for me, my first name is Sean. So I only have one syllable, Sean. And we clap syllables a lot, or we can put our fingers under our chin and say Sean. And my chin drops down one time, so one syllable. And then David, you'd say David. Oh, David has 2 syllables, or David. The chin drops twice. So then being able to hear the rhythm in words and be able to tell that there's different parts in a word is part of this being aware. Rhymes. Kids love rhymes, right? They love to rhyme. They think it's funny and silly and fun. And any of these things can be done in any language. You can talk about syllables in Spanish and German and English. They can rhyme in any language. So there's no requirement for a language that you're using when you're practicing these things. It can be any language, but you are playing with language, playing with the sounds, helping them recognize if the ending of a word sounds the same as an ending of another word, it rhymes, This is a little bit more complicated, and we'll talk about that when we get to that part of the presentation. Can you go to the next one? This is a little bit, you don't need to memorize this, but the big picture, what I want you to know from this slide is that there is a definite progression for kids. There are some skills that are easier for them to learn and hear, and some that are harder for them. And some of these things are developmental. They might not be developmentally ready for some of the stages yet, right? The easiest one for kids is rhyming and alliteration. Alliteration is where you have the same starting sound, like a tongue twister. Peter picked a peck of pickled peppers, maybe. And it all starts with that, right? And then rhyming again. Usually when our kids are first learning to read, or you're reading to them, we read a lot of books that rhyme to them, again, in any language, but we can have fun with those words that sound similar to each other. Then it kind of goes into sentence segmentation, just means being able to break sentences apart and say, oh, there's 4 words in that sentence. How many words are in it? Then they get up into syllables. So being able to put syllables together. So one of the things I do in my kindergarten groups is we'll say like catnip. We make a game out of it. We clap the sounds together, but that's one way to start getting used to, oh, there's part, whole. We put them together, and then they need to be able to take them apart. So I might say playground, and they have to say playground. We kind of make it into a game for them. But these are skills that they have to be able to do to be able to read. If their brain isn't able to quite do that yet, it's gonna be a lot harder for them to, once they get to looking at the letters and the words, to then be able to do those skills. Then we get into the onsets and rhymes. It's just, this is not something you really need to know, but it would be like at. It's the very first sound in the word and the rest of the sound, or the rest of the word, sorry, at. And then phonemic awareness. So this is really where the rubber hits the road for our kids when they are learning to put sounds together to make a word. So before they even look at a word, or they even see the word written, they have to be able to hear the sounds, and then put them together to a word, cat. They have to be able to hear those and do that. And this is something we've noticed well, we're not really post-pandemic, but at this point in time, our first grade students are having a really hard time with this skill, with hearing the sounds and putting them together into a word. That was something that seems to have been impacted by by how education was messed up during the pandemic. So we've been working a lot on that with them, is that blending skill. We call that blending, when we say sounds separately and we have to put them together. So that's something that is that you can do at home too. You can play games in the car. Question?
It changed from the sight words. Because in the past, like you would put like simple sight words like that, it, and instead of saying the sounds of the letters, they would just memorize the pattern of the word.
Yes.
This is what it looks like.
So that is, we're going to get to sight words too, but I'm glad you asked that question. So there are 2 different types of words that kids need to learn and be able to do. There are words that they can sound out, where they say the sounds that they see in the word and they put those sounds together to read the word. Then there are words where you can't do that because they're rule breakers, right? Let's take the word the. If you tried to say each sound in the, T-H-E, you would say Yeah, right? What is that, right? So that word, the, doesn't follow rules. So you have to just know it when you see it. So kids need to be able to do both. They need to be able to know how to sound out. And then we have to tell them, oh, you know what? This word doesn't follow the rules. So you just have to see it and know it. So we call those sight words because they just have to know on sight what the word
They
is.
didn't know the difference of like word,
Like the word tsunami, how do you tell TS?
Right, well, that's the other thing. English has all these exceptions to the rules.
Very many.
So yeah, that's something that makes it really tough for kids is there are a lot of rule breakers in English. So we try to teach them the rules first. And then we'll be like, oh yeah, but there's rule breakers. So here's how you have to handle that.
Like, I know you learn it this way, now you have to do this.
Yeah, it's pretty never ending when you're learning English. It's one of the frustrating things about English. But luckily there are some rules that hold, and so we can get those in there first and then teach them all of the exceptions. Thank you for asking that question. You can go to the next one, Andrea. Thank you. So why is it important? Okay. It's important because English, German, and Spanish all use an alphabetic writing system. So we all have an alphabet that we use, and there are sounds that go with that alphabet. And so they represent those speech sounds. So we need kids to be able to use those sounds to make words. Sound awareness is necessary for learning and using phonics. So once they start connecting, the letter M says it's phonics, but they need to be able to make that connection and know those sounds to be able to proceed into phonics. And then this is a big one, the orange box down here. Sound awareness is a big predictor of future success in reading. So I can't overstate to you all how important it is that you are playing these games with your kids, that you're having these fun rhyming things and breaking words apart and making a mystery and changing sounds and being silly with language so that they can learn to do all of these things, because this is really truly the foundation they need to have before we reintroduce letters to them and start connecting the sounds to the letters so that they can read the words. So it's never too late for this. We really want a lot of this happening in preschool and even younger. And some of it happens in kindergarten too. But it's never too late for this. We do some of this work with our second graders and third graders who are struggling to learn how to read because they either never got it or they just don't have a strong foundation. So these are, and the cool thing is, these are really fun activities that you can do with your kids. And it does seem like fun. It isn't work for them, and it's something they get to do with you. So if you want to invest time and your kid is struggling with reading, these would be great things to do. Read book. Well, I've got strategies coming in here later, but this is a great time. If you have to prioritize your time, this is a good one to spend time. Can you go to the next one, Andrea? Thank you. So we kind of already touched on this, but kids have to understand that the sound in the words dog, dish, and mad is separate from the other sounds before you can ask them to understand what the letter D is in a word, right? They have to understand that you can separate them and they mean something. You know there's a sound, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Sometimes that's a hard one, but it's really being able to match the sound with the written letter. They have to understand that sound goes there and that the letter D is going to say D every time, almost every time you see it in a word. You know, English always has weird things, but for the most part. Can you go to the next one, Andrea? Thank you. So how can you support your child at home with phonological awareness? So for rhyming. So in case you're not sure what a rhyme is, a rhyme just means that the ending sounds of two words sound alike. So the examples are hat, cat, and mat. They start with a different beginning sound, but the ending part of the word is at. They all have that at. So we say those words rhyme. So rhyming can be done, like I said, in any language at all. There are tons of rhyming books at the library, either at our school library, at your local library. There's tons of YouTube videos. I'm sure as parents living in the YouTube age, we've all Googled things, but there's books that you can have read aloud to you on YouTube. There's rhyming games and books, singing songs. So you know how you always think about kindergarten and preschool, there's a lot of songs, singing and rhyming, and poems that they do. And those things are, kids really respond well to that. And to them, it's play, it's enjoyable, it's music, right? But they're really building these skills through hearing those things happening. So the Dr. Seuss books that rhyme, kids love to be silly. So if you can find silly books with silly rhymes, they're going to really want to hear those over and over and over again. And those are wonderful. There's nothing wrong with your kid getting stuck on a book that they want to read over and over and over again. Go ahead and go to the next one. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say, I have a lot of links in some of these slides. I'm hoping that after this presentation, I'll be able to email out.
I'm gonna link it to our page.
Thank you so much. So you'll be able to get the slides, and then if you want to see some of these things, you can click on the links and it'll pull it up for you, okay? Alliteration, that's the one we talked about where the beginning sound is the same. So Peter Piper picked a pickled peppers. So those, and those are fun. Kids think they're hilarious to have all those in a row. And then you can say, oh, say it faster, say it faster. And those are things you can do verbally. They don't need to read anything, There's lots of poems and books. And then there's songs for kids on YouTube too. Again, all these links will be live and you'll be able to click on them when you get the presentation. Okay. Next one, please. Thank you. So sentence segmentation. So this is being able to figure out how many words are in a sentence. And we talked about this before. So the black cat, 3 words in that sentence. So being able to hear that, and you can, play games with that. You can have things physically that they can touch, because for younger kids, sometimes it seems very abstract if you're just saying things, but if they can touch a block or something, a block for each word. So you could put out, the cat has a hat, 5 blocks, and you can touch each one with them while you say the word. You can even, if they're having trouble with that, you can put your hand on top of theirs, touch with them. You can show them, oh, no, you do it, right? So it's just getting used to hearing and realizing that, oh, this is a separate, blocks kind of show you, oh, separate word, separate word, separate word. It gives them a visual so that they can make that understanding more clear to themselves, right? Does that make sense? And then just when you are reading to them, you can start pointing out, oh, this is a word. Look, there's a space between the words. This is how we tell that it's a new word, because there's a little space in between. Just drawing their attention to those things when you're reading to them. You can go to the next one. Thank you, Andrea. So we talked about this already a little bit, the syllable clapping. So this is just something that you can practice with them, and you can use pretty much any words in any language, but you want them to be able to hear those breaks in the words. So this gives you some examples, like table. So you could do table, or this one really works for kids that are having a hard time with the clapping. Sometimes they're just like, they don't really get it. But if they put their hand under their chin, every syllable makes their chin drop. So table, their chin came down twice, so that means there's 2 syllables. So sometimes that's a little bit easier, especially if they over exaggerate. Table, they can really feel those syllables. And again, you can find fun things to do with them, like silly words that you can practice this on. I don't know about your kids, but my kid, anything silly, that's what he wanted to do. So those are just ways to help them get used to hearing those syllables. You don't even have to say the word syllable. I mean, if your kid likes to know the big fancy vocabulary, some of our kids want to know the big word that goes with it. By all means, share that with them. But they don't really need to know that it's a syllable. They just need to be able to hear that words can be broken up into parts and put back together. Any questions about any of that? Next one. So, phonemic awareness. Phoneme is a fancy word for sound. So here we're just talking about sound awareness and being able to take individual sounds and putting them together to make a word. So we've already used cat as our example. So we would say cat, cat. We use our arms sometimes to help them see first sound, middle sound, last sound, and then put all the sounds together. What do you call it, Mrs. Krim? You call it the
Chop and mop.
chop and mop. The chop and mop. It's the individual sounds and then putting them together. And you can do that with, if your child is just learning this concept, you can just do 2 sounds. Like you could do the word at. Do it like this, put them together. It helps them to have a physical movement to go along with it too. It helps their brain understand what they're doing. So for these, you can play listening games where you identify the sound in a word. So you might say, oh, there's a rug. What's the first sound you hear in rug? Oh, you got it, right? You could be taking a walk and see a leaf on a tree. What's the first sound in leaf? Oh, great job. So for kids, identifying that first sound is the easiest one. So you want to start with that, if that's where they're at. Then you would go to the last sound. And the middle sound is the hardest. That's the one that if they can't do the first sound and last sound yet, don't try to do the middle sound. But just having them be able to tell you and make it a game, you know, the more you can feel like it's just fun and it's something you do together, the more buy-in that you'll get from them. They'll be learning without even realizing that they're learning. You do this with pictures where you're asking them, oh, what's the first sound in this picture of dog? What's the first sound? You could say the word dog. What's the first sound you hear? You know? This is a fun one. Once they kind of know, this is a little bit more advanced, but once they kind of can tell you the first sound, last sound, and maybe the middle sound, you can get really silly with them and say, oh, take the word fox and change the first sound to yeah. What do you have? Yucks. What's a yucks? And then you can get really silly with that. But that's called substituting sounds, and that's a more advanced skill, but something that they need to be able to do to manipulate those sounds so that they're ready to become good readers when they get the letters involved. Okay, go to the next one. This is another strategy that you can use that has a visual component for them. The fancy name is Elkonin boxes, and I think they're just named after the person that came up with them. But it's just giving them a box for each sound. So for this example, this word has 3 sounds. So there's 3 boxes, and you can give them anything, a block, a marble, a piece of Play-Doh. I know Mrs. Krim uses Play-Doh in her classroom. You just make a little ball out of Play-Doh. And so what they're going to do is they're going to put that marker in the box and say, and then and then so that they can see, oh, there are 3 sounds in that word. It gives them that visual again. For a lot of our kids that struggle with just understanding how this all works, because learning to read does not come naturally. This isn't something that our brains are wired to do easily. So it can be tough. So we want to give visuals where we can to help them be able to understand, oh, I can count, I can see the markers. Sometimes we use a different color marker for the vowel sounds because we want them to start noticing that that middle sound is usually a vowel sound in these 3 letter words. So that's just another way that you can practice with them. It gives them something to do. Yeah, I think you guys do this in your classroom with the Play-Doh. You put them in and then you take them out.
Yeah, the Play-Doh just gives such great, like they can feel it.
Yeah.
So we do it actually the same word 3 times. So cat, cat, where we're swishing the Play-Doh. Cat. And then they have to go, roll it back up. And all the while emphasizing left to right, which is definitely, that's part of that print into how words go.
That's another thing that can be really tough for kids. So you can go to, Andrea, when you're ready, can you go to the next one? When we get into some of the sounding out things, sometimes kids really need an arrow. Show them where do you start and which way are you going, right? Andrea, can you go to the next one? Thank you. So like I said, music and songs are such a great way for to practice phonological awareness. I linked in just 2 examples, but there are tons of things that you can find on YouTube or in the library. I haven't checked out CDs from the library in a long time. I'm not sure you still can, but we used to be able to check out CDs in the library. I'm sure that you can actually get these songs on Spotify and maybe Apple Music. I haven't tried that yet, but if we bring us into 2023, but just all kinds of fun songs that have sounds and rhymes and playing with these things that we've talked about. So I would say that is your number one thing as an end for your kids, because most of our kids love music and love songs and love to kind of sing along and hear things over and over and over again. So and you know how it is, you get something stuck in your head. It's kind of what we want to happen to them. We want it to get stuck in their head so they have that, their brain gets used to hearing those things. Andrea, can you go to the next one? Thank you. Oh, there's links in the presentation too that has articles with more information if you're dying to learn more about this, but I'm not going to go into all of that, but it's there if you want it later. Okay. Andrea, can you go one more? I'm sorry. I know you're troubleshooting. So that was the big section we just talked about, was phonological awareness. So just sounds. We're not looking at letters yet. Then we get into phonics. This is where we introduce the letters of the alphabet. We teach them the sound that goes with each letter or each combination of letters. This is a really important part of, okay, we're going to be actually giving them something to look at now and read. How do we do that? Okay, Andrea, can you go to the next one? So again, we want them to look at the written letter. Say, oh, there's something to look at now that is written, and we want you to associate a sound with it. So the letter M says, So when we're teaching about and looking at sounds when we're writing, one of the ways that we do it is we put these little slash bars and then we put the letter or the in between them that is the sound. So you're going to see some of that in the presentation. And when you see that, it just means the sound. So M says, Go ahead, Andrea. So at our school, this is something new. I think that, well, I think first grade may have trialed it last year, but this year, kindergarten, first grade, and second. Well, kindergarten and first grade. Yeah, exactly. So we are all trying to get everything as consistent as possible for our students. So when you look at our chart here, this shows each letter of the alphabet and a little visual for the motion that we use. So we're trying to really incorporate multi-sensory learning, because when we add a movement to something, it helps our kids' brains remember it. So we're just adding that in. So we have movements for each sound in English and in German. This chart shows you the letters that have the yellow border. Those sounds are the same in English and in German. So the motions are the same in English and in German. So if your child knows that M says, that's true in their English classroom, that's true in their German classroom. So they don't have to remember a different motion just because it's German. As long as it makes the same sound, they're making that same motion. So we're already seeing really good things by incorporating this. The kids are having less trouble remembering the sounds. And because it goes back and forth from week to week, it's really helpful for them. There are letters that don't make the same sound, so we do see them getting those confused. But in those cases, they have a motion for the English sound and a different motion for the German sound. So that physical component really helps them remember what sound they need to say. So a lot of times we'll have, if I'm asking the kids, what sound does O make? Well, O makes a different sound in German than it does in English. So in German, and I'm probably not going to get this right because I don't speak German, but I think it's I think. Don't quote me on that. But so they do this. This is but the English one is and they have a different motion to do with that. So when I have a child that's getting confused with me, I'll just look at them and go, and they'll say, the motion helps cue their brain. So that's why we're working really hard this year to teach them all of the motions that go with the sound. So you may see them doing that at home. We made a video that has a little quick clip of each sound in English with them. Sorry, me. It's so funny because for you guys too, if it helps you at home to have that quick little reference. It's about 3 seconds per video. It just tells you the sound and shows you the motion, so that if you're trying to practice it with your kids, you can do it with them. So English has 44 sounds. We only have 26 letters in our alphabet, but we have letter combinations that make different sounds. So one of the handouts over there, if you're dying to know all of the 44 sounds in English, there's a handout over there that tells you. But we don't have, we haven't created a motion for every single sound yet. Right now, we just have our alphabet sounds that we've done. But readers have to learn all of the letter and letter combinations and the sound that goes with them so that they can read everything that they see. This is true for English. This is true for Spanish. This is true for German. The sounds might be different. The letter combinations might be different, but they still have to learn the sound that goes with the letter or letters in order to read that language, the words in that. So that's something that is common across all languages. And if you have a student who is biliterate, so they are learning to read in English and Spanish or German and English, whatever practice they're doing in the one language with this is priming their brain to be doing it with the other language too. So that's why we encourage whatever your home language is, if you want to practice these skills in that language, that's fine because it helps build the neural pathways that they need to be able to learn this in another language as well.
We actually see that as a real gift
Yes.
for our children.
Well, there's lots of research that shows when kids are multilingual and multiliterate that it has all these benefits for them later in life. And a lot of it is they're building these pathways and these ways of thinking about things that benefit them later in life. Can you go to the next one, please? So this is how we use our phonics skills to sound out a word. So you see the word cat, you have to say each sound, ah, and then you can sweep that arrow underneath and say cat. So this is something I see with the first graders a lot too. Sometimes I'll say at, tack, because the last sound they heard was the t, because they said that last, and so that's the first sound that comes out of their mouth. So we try to give them that visual of, oh, you got to go back here and get your mouth ready to say that sound. What sound is going to come first? Cat. And then you try to get them to read it through that way. And it takes a lot of practice. It doesn't come easily for every kid. For some kids, they pick it up very quickly, but not everyone.
Why would we put the C instead of the?
So for this one, because they're in those little brackets mean that it's just the sound. So when we put the sound up there, I don't know, the example I had the K in it, because the sound K actually has 3 different ways you can spell it in English. You can spell it with a C, with a K, or the CK. Yes, it is, but
You're getting ahead of yourself.
no, it's a good question. There's a whole phonetic alphabet that shows you how to write sounds, and the way that they represent the sound is with the K. But you could also put a C there, and we would all know what we were talking about. You know what I mean? The C can make another sound too. It can also say, but only if it has an I, an E, or a Y after it. We're not going to try that. Can you go to the next one? See how English is?
Gosh.
So we talked a little bit about reading with phonics. I know, that's crazy. Let's talk a little bit about spelling. I'm going to say this now, it's a slide later, but if you can spell a word, you can read a word. So spelling is really important, okay? So once kids know the sounds, then you can start working with them on using the sounds to build a word. So go ahead and go to the next one. So this is something that I do in my groups, and I think some of our teachers probably have variations of this, but this doesn't mean that this is what's happening in your child's classroom, but I want to show it to you because it is something that you could easily do at home if you wanted to. I have little printouts of little hands in my classroom where kids can tap the sound. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But this is a way that you can do it without having anything. You can just tap your fingers. You can say, ah, just using your hand. Now, not every child is going to have the dexterity to do that at a young age. So you probably do want to have something they can just touch. You know what I mean? But that is something they can do without having anything. You can go to the next one, Andrea. So this is what it looks like when we're practicing spelling in my first grade groups. We're working on three words that have 3 sounds. So they have what we call our tapping hands. So this is a person who writes with their right hand. They have this tapping hand. If I have left-handed students, they have a tapping hand that's over here. The reason is we always are going left to right. So for a right-handed student who holds their pencil here, they would tap little finger, ring finger, middle finger. If you were a left-handed student who holds their pencil here, you would tap thumb, index finger, middle finger. Okay, so we always are going left to right. We're always reinforcing that. So, Andrea, this is the one where you're going to we go through these relatively quickly. So the teacher is going to say, spell the word mat. So the student's going to tap, the right-handed student is going to tap their little finger and they're thinking, which letter says, Go to the next one. So they think, oh, M says, So they write it on their first sound line. So we give them 3 lines and we tell them, you're going to put one sound. Ooh, I like it. He's like,
Yeah, I connected already.
right? So
This is easy.
So go ahead and go to the next one. So they've got their M. So now they're saying, okay, mat. I'm spelling mat. So now I'm tapping my ring finger and I'm thinking, which letter says A? Go ahead and do the next one. So they write the letter A. Then they go to the next one. So now they're thinking again, and they may have to say the word over and over again. I encourage them to do that. Mat. Okay. What letter says T? Yeah. So now they've got this. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Then we have them rewrite it just on one line. Go ahead and rewrite the word. So now it looks like a regular word without spaces in between. And then go to the next one. And then we have them read it. You can spell it, you can read it. So they look at this and they say match. For the next one. So this is actually something that has resonated strongly with me this year. And I'm trying to spend a lot more time teaching spelling and working with them to build words from the sounds. And I feel like, I don't have data yet, but I feel like it is really helping my first grade students learn to be better readers and spellers. You may have a child at home who doesn't need those 3 lines. You may be able to just have them write the word and think about, oh, I tap the sounds. But if you're having a child if you have a child who's really struggling to do that, give them the 3 lines. It's a clue. There's 3 sounds in this word. So you need to be able to identify those 3 sounds in the letters that go with them to spell the word. It's like a little clue that you can get. Any questions about that one? Okay.
And John, it is sounds, not letters. So like
Yes.
the word dish
Yes.
is dish.
Yes. So we have in English and in other languages too, we have some sounds that have 2 letters. So the example that Megan was giving was the sound sh is spelled S-H. It has 2 letters. So it's still one sound though. So when you're spelling it, you have to write both letters on that sound line because those 2 letters together make the sh sound. So that's what we're teaching them, is to think in terms of sounds. And some sounds have more than 1 letter. Thank you for bringing that up. Can you go to the next one? See, I thought I was going to be done early, but it's taking me longer than I expected. So we already briefly talked about sight words. Go to the next one. Sight words are basically, there's 2 different kinds of sight words. There's sight words that don't follow the rules. So you have to just see them and know what they are because you cannot sound them out. They don't sound like you would expect them to. And then there's also words that we consider sight words because of the frequency that kids see them in writing. I'm trying to think, the word can. You can sound out can, but kids see it so frequently, it's often included on lists of sight words because if they see it all the time, so we want them to see it and know it. Ultimately, when you've become an experienced reader, everything's a sight word, right? Almost everything. You see it, you know the word. I mean, as an adult, I still come across the bigger words that I might need, multisyllabic words that I might need to sound out that I've never seen before. But for the most part, most words that you see are turning into sight words. You don't have to sound them out unless you've never heard the word before. Go on to the next one. So how can you support your child at home with phonics? Go ahead, Andrea. So practice letter identification. So this is their first learning, what are the letters? So transitional kindergarten, I know they just started after winter break, they started doing some actual practice for what is that letter, right? And in kindergarten, there's a lot of letter learning. So you can have them build letters out of Play-Doh. You can do it with them. You can pull the Play-Doh up and form the letters. You can play I Spy with letters. Count the letters in your child's name. Talk about what are they? What are the letters in your name? You know, find those personal connections for them. A lot of kids, that's really where they do their first learning, is their own name, because they see that a lot. They want to write it. This is something that's really exciting when your child starts to learn letters. They start pointing them out to you when you're driving down the street. They're like, there's an A, there's a B. And it's kind of exciting because you're like, you're right, good job. Magnetic letters, and my son loved these. They're just those little foam letters that you can play with in the bathtub. And just so anytime you just make it play, you can kind of sneak in a little bit of learning with it. But these are just some good ways that kids oftentimes will just get these themselves and play with them. It isn't something you have to say, go practice your letters, right? Because it's fun for them. So these are just good things to have around. You can have like the magnetic letters on your refrigerator, down at their level, so that you can just play around with it and try to spell things. There's also a ton of videos on YouTube. I linked to one of them that the transitional kindergarten classroom uses, Jack Hartman. They do these videos every single day in the transitional kindergarten class, but he has a wide range of videos. But just, again, fun things that they can watch and listen to. They're not too long, 2 to 4 minutes, something quick. You watch it in the car, whatever works for you. Okay, you can go to the next one, Andrea. So after they learn their letters and can recognize and name the letters, then you start making the connection between the sound that goes with the letter. So ways that you can help with that is you can ask your child, I heard that you have motions that go with the letters. Can you teach them to me? I don't know if transitional kindergarten has done this yet, but kindergarten and first grade, definitely. Sam, can you teach me the motion that goes with that sound? So 2 things. If kids can teach you something, it is solidifying that concept in their own brain. So having them teach it to you helps them really get it in there. And 2, if they can't do it, it lets you know, oh, I need to give extra practice on this one. So it's kind of like your little assessment for, oh, I need to practice this one more with my child. Some fun things that you can do is have them draw letters in the sand and practice saying the sounds. If sand doesn't work for you, you can get like a cookie sheet and put rice and draw it in rice, and then they can see it. Shaving cream's a fun one, but kind of messy. But you can put shaving cream right on your table, and they can draw letters in it, and you can just wipe it up. It cleans your table pretty good too while it's on there. The thing that we work on when we're working on letters and sounds is we have a kind of formulaic chant that we say for every sound. So for the example here, it says T says T. We say the name of the letter, and then we say says, the sound of the letter. And we just do that over and over and over again. We have Sam in my classroom, and we just do that all the time. So you can always, M says, T says, T. So it's just that repeat. And then this is a link to the video that we made at AEA that goes with the specific motions that we have. And that goes with that. There's a handout on the table that has that same sheet that shows you a visual of the motion, and then the letters, the sounds that are the same in English and German that are highlighted in yellow. You can go to the next one, Andrea. I feel like I'm speeding up now because it's taking longer than I thought. And then you can practice sounding out and blending the sounds into words. So, when your kids are first learning, it's really good to give them a little picture, because they're working on getting it. They're working on getting it. Oh, van, and then they can match that vocabulary that they already know. They know the word van, they know it goes with that picture, then they can figure out what the word is. So that's a nice little clue that you can give them. And once they get better at it, you take the picture away and have them just doing the letters, just doing the sounds. Really practicing sliding your finger underneath, or having them slide their finger underneath, that directionality is really important. A lot of them really they don't really have a strong sense of directionality. So being able to consistently start at the left, swoop to the right, start at the left, swoop to the right helps them a lot. There's a video linked here where you can watch an example of a teacher practicing this with a child, so that if you wanted to try to do that at home, you have something you can reference. Go to the next one. Thank you. Lots more links. This is the first one, Sounds and Symbols, is a TV show that has a lot of really great information about how kids learn to read. If you're interested in watching that, there's a link in here. Again, I don't know how many people really want to take a deep dive in, but if you wanted to watch something, I think it's a really helpful one. You can go to the next one. Some of these are some of the handouts I have over here, but just more info if you want it. You can go to the next one, Andrea. So we're almost done. A few more slides. Other helpful things to know. Go ahead and go one more. So I found this cartoon today and it cracked me up. In education, we love acronyms. We like to make initials for everything. So some of you may have heard about our SST meetings, which stand for Student Study Team or Student Success Team. But in education, we have initials for everything, acronyms. The cartoon says, before I begin, one of the acronyms I'm going to use is completely made up. See if you can figure out which one. So a lot of times when you're talking to teachers or people in education, we use a lot of acronyms. Stop us. And what does that mean? What is that? It's habitual for us. We talk about the same things over and over again, and we're so used to saying these. We do try to stop doing that with people who are not in education, but we all slip up. If you're talking to your child's teacher or a staff member at school and they say something to you that you don't understand, maybe it's an acronym or maybe it's like, what are they talking about? Please ask us, right? The last thing any of us at AEA want is for you not to understand what we want to communicate. So be an advocate for yourself and feel free to ask us. Call us on our mistake of not making clear what we want you guys to know. So please do that.
Sean, can you explain what an acronym is?
Sorry, like an acronym is where we use the first letter in one of the words. So I was doing Student Study Team as an example. So the first letter in student is S, first letter in study is S, and then the first letter in T is team. So we would call it an SST instead of Student Study Team.
Like USA for you.
Exactly. That would have been a much better example. United States of America. Perfect. Can you go to the next one? See, next time you present me next. If you have concerns, so I also wanted to share, what should you do if you have concerns about your child's reading skills? The very first thing you should do is just talk to your child's teacher. Just say, is this normal? Is this where we want them to be? How do they compare with the other kids in first grade or kindergarten or transitional kindergarten? What else can we be doing? Have that conversation. Your teacher should be able to give you an idea of how your child is doing compared to where we want them to be at this time of the school year. And I know all of our teachers are more than happy to kind of help you understand where your child is at. In addition to that, or after that, or separately from that, I'm always available if you want to email me or stop by. I'm always available to answer questions, or we can talk more about any of the things we talked about, or if some of the ideas we shared today are not working for you and your child, let's brainstorm some other things that you can do. There's, of course, there's endless possibilities for what you can do and only so much that we can share. And then, like I was saying, Student Study Team or Student Success Team. These are meetings that we have all of the time for our kids where the teachers come, families come. We have one of our administrators. Sometimes we have one of our special education teachers. We have one of our school psychology staff. We all sit around the table together and we talk about what are the concerns? What are the strengths? What can we do to support any concerns that we have? So if after you've talked to your teacher or talked to me and you're still really worried, or maybe the teachers agree, yeah, we're concerned with how your child's progress is going right now, we may want to schedule one of these meetings. And the way that you do that is, again, just talking to your child's teacher and asking them, oh, can we schedule a meeting where we can talk more about this and figure out. So in the meetings, then we brainstorm together. What are our concerns? How can we support the child? What can you do at home? What can we do at school? So, and then we have a formal document for that. We make goals for them to make sure that they are making the progress we want them to. So that's something you can do if you're having concerns. This is not something that we would do for a child that if you ask the teacher and the teacher says, oh yeah, they're right where they should be. This isn't something we would do. It's more for kids who are having concerns about how they're doing it. Go to the next one, Andrea. So after all of this, what I want you to walk away from is the most important things that you guys can do at home as a family is talk with your child, have conversations all the time. This exposure to hearing vocabulary in any language, in your home language, in English, in German, whatever you are speaking and doing at home, just have those talk with them all the time. The more you talk with them, the more words they hear, the more they understand and recognize those words later. Read to your child. Even if they may not be ready at all to even try reading a word yet. Help them love it, because I'll tell you a secret. My son would kill me if he knew I was telling you this, but he's 14. I still read to him every single night, and he gets really mad if I don't. So it is something that it's a time with your parent, a time with a family member that is special, and it can help them really form that love of reading. They associate it with being with someone they love and spending time with someone they love, and it's a really strong association. They're just reading with them, helping them enjoy it. And then find ways to play with sounds and letters and make it fun and enjoyable. Let them know that you like it, that it's fun for you. Set that example for them. If you're doing those things, I mean, you can always do more. You can always do a lot of the things that we talked about. But if you're doing these things, it is a huge, huge help for your child becoming a reader and building those skills with them. All right, we only have 3 minutes left.
Make it quick.
But if anyone has to leave, don't feel bad about getting up and leaving. But I'm sorry that lasted longer than I thought. I was hoping to have more time for Q&A, but I can stay as long as needed. But does anyone have any questions just based on what you heard, or anything I didn't talk about that you were hoping to learn more about or hear about? I know it was a lot. Yeah, thank you. I'm always available. Your children's teachers are always available to you. Can you go one more, Andrea? I've got my email here too, but if you don't access this later or anything, you can always get my email from the teachers or the front office. I love what I do, and I really want to work more with families on whatever you guys need to help you feel good about how your child's doing and to help your child feel good about how they're doing. So anything that I can do to support you, please reach out. We'll figure out something if we have to brainstorm something. Some things are tough, but I really love this, and there's lots of fun ways that you can support your kids. So anytime.
And I think it's the hardest thing is to find books, like when they do get to the point.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that, Megan.
Where like they are starting to read, they're putting that sound system together, and just like they bring books from the library. Actually, picture books are very sophisticated and have words that we do not expect first graders to read, that you think, oh, picture books. Those are great to read to them.
So
finding books.
We didn't have a lot of time to talk about this, but that is one of the #1 things that families ask us. How do we know that our child can read a book? So one of the handouts over there is called Finding the Right Book for Your Child. And it's got English, and there's a Spanish one too. And it kind of gives you some tips for what you should look for, so that oh, this one's probably okay for them. Just general rule of thumb. If they read one page, try to read one page of a book, and there's 4 or 5 words they cannot figure out, it's too hard for them. It doesn't mean they shouldn't read it, but they should read it with help from you. If they can read all but one of the words on the page, that's probably something that they can read on their own. For beginning readers, there might not be a whole lot of things they can read all by themselves, right? They may need help from you, but that's okay, right? But they'll slowly get there. And that's something I can always help with too. If you're having a hard time finding books for your child, that's something we can connect on. I've got a big library up in my classroom that is separate from our school library, and we can usually find books that would work for your child. Thank you for reading. A what?
Reading.
I think some teachers have book clubs that they set up within their class. Did we have a book club for students? Didn't you run one?
I used to help.
Yeah.
So sometimes our librarian, Mrs. Owens, will lead book clubs. She has not done that yet this year, and it's usually just for upper grade students. And she can only take a certain number, and I think it's usually done during their lunchtime,
Mhm.
like their lunch recess. But I don't know if that'll be happening this year or not.
But I mean,
So-
if that's something that families are interested in doing, we might be able to collaborate on putting something together. I don't know, we have done it before, but it doesn't mean we can't. That's kind of where I'm at with my job right now is I wanna, whatever you guys think will be helpful for families, let's do
I
it.
was
We'll
thinking
figure it out.
Because our fourth grader, he has a hard time connecting with kids that read at the same level.
Mhm.
He wants to read certain books, but then most of the kids his age are reading a different book.
Yes.
So then he's reading books that are lower to his reading.
Mhm.
So now he's not developing to a higher reading because he's like, no, because my friends are reading this and I want to read it.
I know that a lot of the public libraries have the book clubs for the kids,
Mhm.
all the way, from younger up to older. So
Okay.
you can check that as well.
That is something that's very challenging that we see a lot with kids that maybe are not as proficient at readers. And there's a variety at every grade level of kids that are reading like huge chapter books and the other kids that are still kind of learning to read. So what we try to do is have conversations with them just about, everyone's at a different level. And just because you couldn't read that book that your friends were reading right now, it doesn't mean that you won't be able to do that. But right now, here's the way that you can get to that is we're working on these books right here. So the more you practice, the better. It's just like with anything else. And I tell kids too, reading's not easy, right? It can be really hard. And for some people, it comes easier for them. And for other kids, it's not easy. And so just like anything else in our lives, when we have something that we want to do that is tough, it takes practice and persistence and dedication. And so we want to reward them for that when we see them sticking with it, even though it may not be the funnest thing and maybe they would rather be doing something else. But that's the only way to get there, But again, if this is something, I don't know your other son, but it's definitely something I would talk with their teacher about and see what is the teacher suggesting, what is already being done. Are there other things that we could do to help with this? So I would definitely reach out if you haven't already, just express that concern and see.
Yeah, it's just he enjoys that and he reads great above his level, but I want him to keep pushing himself to read like books that are more challenging for him versus the Diary of a Wimpy Kid,
A lot of boys get stuck on those funny ones. So the key is really finding the right book that will really pique his interest. And sometimes that's hard to find, especially for boys. And maybe it's because I struggled with this with my own son too, is finding books that they really enjoy besides Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which, and those silly ones. It can be hard, but we can also talk separately too about maybe ideas for some that might connect with him, but all kids are different. That's really the thing. The good thing is there's so many different books out there. You can usually find something, but sometimes it's hard.
I noticed in your signature in your email, you always write the book you're reading.
Uh-huh.
The book you're reading with your son. Is that the book that you read to him?
That's what I read
tonight?
to him every night.
Yeah.
In my email signature, I always put the book that I'm reading and the book I'm reading to him. So sometimes I'm hoping that might be a good idea. My kid likes to read books that I would consider younger because he doesn't like real life. He just wants to escape into silliness. And so yeah, we read. We've moved on from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, thank goodness, because I was like, if I have to read another one of those books. But yeah, it's just finding the ones.
I was going to share that we do have a full-time credentialed librarian. Most of you probably already know Mrs. Mullins. We're really fortunate as an elementary school to have a full-time credentialed librarian plus our German librarian. So she is really good at trying to find, books to support each kid. She's just a wealth of knowledge. So always, take advantage of that too. You can always email her or,
And she's probably a lot better at that. That's one of my weaknesses right now, this being my first year doing this, is I'm not as familiar with all of the books. Very familiar with the books I've read to my son, but not familiar with all of the different books. Like if I have a little girl who loves fairies, I'm not gonna know off the top of my head, oh, you should read these books. But so that's something I'll be working on to improve my own skills. But our school librarian, Mrs. Gollins, would definitely know that. So she may be a good resource.
How can we send that?
So, her, email, I can write it down, but it is on the
I'll send
website too. It's on the website if you just go to staff.
I'll link the presentation up, and so I'll add it on this last slide here too, so you can find it easily there.
She actually has a whole library website too, that is wonderful, it's connected.
Maybe on
to
the
our
website, yeah.
So that's another resource too, because we also have a lot of free books online, digital books, yeah, through our school website. So check that out, please. So I think we need to just close out just because we have some staff members watching.
Okay.
Questions? Sean's been with us for a long time, as she shared, but it is her first year being one of our literacy specialists, and she did a fabulous job tonight. So if we can all give her a round of applause. And then Cameron, it's a long night for you all, so give yourself some.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You're not allowed to leave your children to make sure that.
Right, we are ending the presentation. Thank you so much.